Jadene, today is about you. We're going to hear your story. And the thing I love about you, Jadene, is that you are so genuine and honest, and you don't sugarcoat things. You tell it like it is, and I think the story that you have to share with us today is really going to resonate with people because of those qualities, your honesty, the genuine heart that you have, and really the realness of you. And we know that your story isn't an easy one, and we appreciate your vulnerability to share it. We appreciate that you're going to open up your heart and your life. And really, at the end of the day, this is about your beautiful boy, Matt.
You know, I think I've shared with the two of you that Matt's not cookie cutter. He was definitely hand-shaped. He's got a dual diagnosis of Down syndrome and autism, along with many other labels have been put on him. But Down syndrome and autism were the two primary. And that was a fight that I had through his entire childhood and early adulthood, in that when I was getting my degree in special ed, he was doing things that were so different from other little toddlers with Down syndrome. And I'm in a psych class, and we're studying abnormal psychology, and I'm reading about autism, and I'm like, boy, this sounds just like Matt. All the characteristics that I was reading were things that I was seeing in Matt. And so I started asking professionals who worked with Matt, you know, the medical doctors and therapists that were working with him, and everybody said, oh, no, it's because he has Down syndrome. Now, this would have been 1979. And I went through his childhood just knowing in my heart that he had autism, not understanding why people who should know this stuff didn't see it the way I saw it, but they continue to put everything on his Down syndrome. And when he was in his 30s, we got with a psychiatrist who was with him for 30 minutes and said, I don't know why he does not have a dual diagnosis. He definitely has characteristics of autism. In addition, he has apraxia, in that by then he had very little spoken language. He had gained language, lost language, gained it back, lost it again, to where we are today, where now he's virtually nonverbal. And this is not from Alzheimer's. This is how he's lived most of his life, is virtually nonverbal. He has, you know, he'll say ma for mom. He waves, and he'll say ha when we FaceTime. So they are approximations of words, but it's very, very, very limited what he has. But it took him till he was probably in his mid-30s when I got a diagnosis that I knew he had when he was 4.
Our listeners should know you wrote beautifully about, especially your early days raising Matt, in a book. And the book is called Unwrapping the Gifts of Disability. In the book, you share about this history that you and Matt have of being ignored, of being unseen or misunderstood. But what I also found really inspiring is that you highlight some moments of grace or blessings, right? Where I what's coming to mind is after the diagnosis of Matt in the hospital, which sounded pretty bleak. I mean, you were by yourself. You didn't have your husband with you when you found out. And then you were given a pretty dire view of what his future was going to be by that doctor.
When I had Mike, I remember he was the most beautiful baby in the nursery. He had this precious little round face, and he was so cute. Didn't look like a newborn. He looked like he was, you know, a couple weeks old when he was born. None of the red blotches and stuff. And then Matt was born, and Matt was all puffy, and his little eyes didn't open, and he just didn't look good. My sister and my best friend came to visit. This would have been Thursday night, because the baby was born on Tuesday. I was going home on Friday. This would have been Thursday night, and we were just commenting, you know, look how tiny his ears are, you know, and then we were we had long hair. We're lifting hair and going, who's got little ears and stuff, not knowing. And while we're standing at the nursery looking at the baby, the nurse comes up and said, visiting hours are over, your visitors need to leave. And I'm like, they rang a bell. They would ring a bell, say, leave. I mean, these are old days. You know, I'm your parents' age, so this would have happened when you all were born. So they left, and doctor comes in my room, and he says, he's standing at the foot of the bed, and he goes, can I borrow you? He takes me out. We're walking down the hall. And I said, I had Rh negative blood, but so did Matt. But my brain went, there's a Rh factor problem, not processing yet. And I said, we have a problem, don't we? And he said, I think so. And so he starts naming, you know, he's got low set ears, he's got slanted eyes. I don't remember the whole list of things, but he says all of that leads us to believe that Matt has Down syndrome. Of course, that crushed me. Joe was not there because he was doing finals I think he was in junior college at the time, and he was doing his finals. And Joe had to drive it was at least 20 minutes, maybe 30, to the hospital, knowing that there's something wrong with his baby. I don't know how much the doctor told Joe about the diagnosis and stuff over the phone, but yeah, so then they said, you can stay another day if you want. You know, we have social workers, and all I wanted to do was be at home. So I went home, and then I went through a depression that lasted like 15 months, and it was tough. And I look back and I think, you know, I see our folks who are so capable now. And I see some folks who have kids around Matt's age, and those kids, you know, have very different, they didn't have the autism and stuff, but just very different lives than what Matt had. And I keep thinking, why did I limit Matt? Why did I not see it from he could do anything Michael does? And maybe it's because it was presented to me as a tragedy. I had no concept that he could do what Michael could do, you know?
Yeah. What I remember most about the book is shortly after you were exposed to an early intervention program, probably one of the first in the country, where you got to see what was possible and what was beginning to be possible. And what a gift that was, right? It seems like there were certain moments that really changed the trajectory of your story. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Bringing that memory back, it brings tears to my eyes, because that was something that I got to experience with a very beloved aunt and uncle. After, I don't know how old Matt was, maybe a few months old, I went up and spent about 6 weeks with this aunt and uncle. And my aunt found this early intervention program. They drove me and Matt up to the program so that I could see what was going on. And you're right, there were probably a half dozen of them in the whole country. That was so new. I write in the book about it started snowing, and my uncle did not care. It was so important that I get to see that, you know, and by the time we were driving back to their farm, it was snowing heavily. I was really worried about it, but it was amazing because, yes, I was told Matt would never walk, he would never feed himself, he would never be toilet trained. At that time, in the 70s, the best thing I could hope for was that he'd be able to live in a group home. And Matt's pediatrician said he wouldn't even be able to be in the group home. There just happened to be a men's group home across the street from the pediatrician's office. And he said, you know, the house across the street, there's not one person with Down syndrome. That's not the term he used. There's not one man with Down syndrome that lives in that house because they can't do it. So that was how this was laid out to me. And then I go to the early intervention program, and I see these babies signing with their moms, you know, learning to roll over. Some of them were, you know, starting to crawl, and it was the hope that I hadn't been given, that maybe Matt could do some things. But, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking about that just the other day about, at one point, I think Matt was a teenager, probably late teens. And I had a dad say something to me about, had I set higher expectations for Matt, he would have been doing more. And, I often questioned that, because Matt didn't progress like typical kids with Down syndrome progress. Having a child who's got extra challenges, not that Down syndrome isn't a challenge, because it is, but then to have autism on top of it, apraxia with that, some nonverbal Tourette's.
Well, and undiagnosed autism for the most part,
yes,
right?
And it was undiagnosed for the most part. So he wasn't even approached in the way that we would look at kids with autism. So
you talk about that in the book, about all these mixed messages that you were getting, right? The doctors were telling you that you weren't doing enough. Parents and friends were telling you you were spending too much time worrying about it. And the underlying message was, either way, it was all your fault, right? Like,
either way, it was all my fault. And this was a period where I had no other parent to reach out to. So I was very isolated. I didn't have an early intervention program. We lived in Melbourne, Florida, on the East Coast. We didn't have early intervention programs close by. In fact, there was one in Orlando, but they wouldn't take a baby with Down syndrome. You had to have cerebral palsy to go to it.
In the book, you do talk about a great story about a particular school that Matt was blessed to go to in Germany that seemed to fit the bill, right? Like they gave you a glimpse of what it could be like.
Yeah. So that was, that was a roller coaster time of my life. We were in Germany. Joe was in the Army, and we had been there for 2 school years. And the Department of Defense decided, that's who runs the schools, they decided they weren't going to serve Matt. He was challenging. He was very challenging. And so it's a very long story. It's in the book, so I won't go into the details. But he ended up placed in a German residential school that was a Catholic school. It was about 45 minutes from where we were living, and it broke my heart. He would have been maybe 8. I don't know. He was young, but it broke my heart that I couldn't care for him. I couldn't do enough to make sure that he was okay and that he could stay with his family. And so he goes to this German school and barely speaks any English, but they were so loving with him. I did this little dictionary. It was Matt's dictionary, and so it had whatever sound he made. Like, I'll give you an example. He would say the word peepaw, and it meant pizza. So then I looked up in the German English dictionary, and I put down what the German word was for pizza. So it was like 3 columns. And it was pretty good size and stuff. So, they could kind of understand him and stuff. And then he did some signs. I had some sign information and stuff. And we were told when he was placed there that they would keep him for 6 weeks without coming home. I just couldn't imagine living 6 weeks. I didn't have my little guy to hug and put to bed and, get kisses from and stuff. And 4 weeks after he was there, he had done so well that they let him come home for a weekend. And it was amazing, because I remember we had one of those, they're kind of bamboo chairs, and they're on a hanger, and a swing. And he loved that vestibular motion and stuff. He loved that swing. And he got in that swing, and I snapped a picture of him. He had the biggest smile on his face. And when I saw that smile, I realized he had not smiled for like a year. He was in such a bad place and stuff. So he's there for a little over a year, and I was leaving Germany and coming back to Florida ahead of Matt and Joe. And I was going to get services in place for Matt. That was my plan. And so we went and we had like an exit interview with the school and the people who ran the residential part. And it was so amazing because, you know, they did not speak English. The principal of the school spoke broken English. And he said to me, "Mrs. Ransdell, I keep Matt and I bring him to you on holidays, my expense." It's like, no way. You know, you're not keeping my baby. I'm sorry, I'm bringing him home. But it made me feel so good to know that somebody finally saw the Matt that I knew. They saw what a precious soul he is. And they saw him as being lovable. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was really, really nice, you know. When I wrote the book, the fellow who did my developmental editing, he said, you need to talk about what was the difference. Why did Department of Defense want him out of their school? And why was the German school so embracing of him that they wanted to keep him? And all I could think of was they saw him as a person, not as a problem. You know, they saw him with open hearts and not closed, cold hearts. And, you know, Matt didn't fit the mold. Matt has been a unique kiddo, and he's lived an amazing life, even with all the challenges that he's faced. So I'm very proud of him. His life could be very different, and he's still, even as Alzheimer's is showing up more and more, he still loves his life, and he still gives love to everybody who spends time with him and is really willing to be there with him.
What resonates with me is that you take a story and a child, a baby that was presented to you as a tragedy, as you said, and you have turned it into triumph. I mean, that's what just comes to my mind. You know, you went from tragedy to triumph, and I'm so in awe of you as a mom, as somebody with unconditional love. There is no better example of unconditional love than what you just shared with us. And you were a pioneer. You were paving the way. You were resilient. The challenges that you overcame and never gave up. I mean, it would have been easy to throw in the towel. And I'm sure you felt many times that you weren't doing enough and that you were a failure. And, you know, you felt it that way. Me, listening to your story, all I see is just triumph in this story, and the way that you're continuing to do the things to advocate is just so heartwarming and admirable. And like Molly said, the fact that you created this support group for us, that was at a time for me when I felt like my world was falling apart and I had nowhere to turn. That was a saving grace for me. And I know it's going to be for so many other people. So, you know, I just want to let you know that we appreciate your openness and your honesty and your vulnerability and all the love that you have to share, because it's like that ripple effect. It just keeps going and going and going. And you have no idea the amount of people that you're touching and that you've touched in the past. And, you know, all I just think of is go Matt's mom. Matt's mom is just, she's awesome.
Thank you.
And Jadene, you, I mean, it's just, your story is incredible, because what I keep getting out of it is what a big giver you are. At every stage, you give back, and you've given back. You've got that drive in you, and who knows how many people you've helped with that. And what I think is really beautiful and bittersweet, because it's sad too, is that you were alone and isolated and didn't have the support you needed when you needed it. And instead of that beating you down, you decided to give that to others, which is what you did with the Alzheimer's diagnosis too. I tell anyone who's willing to listen is, how thankful I am that you started that Facebook group. I mean, it's a light in a forest, right? I think probably your book did the same, and it sounds like those groups that you created in Germany and for the Army and in Florida, and when Matt was a baby and when he was a teenager, and that's the thread that I hear. That what you did for us with Alzheimer's is not the first time you've done that.
I just want to say that it wasn't until Matt had the Alzheimer's diagnosis and I connected with NDSS and Candy Pickard, that I finally felt like I was being listened to. I was there. There's a lot that has not been shared with you guys yet, but it's the first time in my life, and we're talking the last 10 years or so, that I felt like what I had to say was valued. Because Matt has been so different. So it's and that's why I get so emotional about it, because I've done this for Matt's entire life, and it's only been the last 10 or so that people were like, thank you for sharing this. Otherwise it was just like, okay, whatever, go away, so. One of the things I'd like to mention, just because it's big on my heart, the support group has introduced me to so many siblings. And siblings are, I don't know, I have such a love for for all the siblings, but especially the siblings in our support group, because I had that mixed message way back of, you're not doing enough, you're doing too much, so I have lived 50 years. I still question this. I have lived 50 years wondering, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Wondering if Michael got cheated. Michael is Matt's older brother. And Michael has told me several times, Mom, no, I never felt cheated. Matt's my brother and I love him, but I didn't see the outwardly connection that I see with siblings, with kids with disabilities and stuff. And so I really wondered, did he really feel connected to his brother? Does he really feel connected to his brother? There's not a big age difference, chronological. There's a huge developmental difference, and there always was from the time they were little. So I didn't know. I do know when we moved home back to Florida from Germany that, I was seeking a group home placement. We couldn't get it because of the way group homes were set up here in Florida. And I talked to Michael because I was concerned. He was coming here, going to be making new friends as a teenage boy. And how was he going to make new friends, really good friends, if he had this brother who was so challenging? And Michael, even then, he was maybe 14, I don't know, he was not driving yet, he was youngish. And he said to me, when I said, Mike, we're having trouble, we can't find a group home. And he says, Mom, he's my brother, he belongs in this family, And so I kind of relaxed. And I later learned that if he had friends over and they'd go hang out in Mike's room, if Matt wandered into his room and any of his friends had a problem with it, he made his friend leave. It's like, that's my brother. If you can't deal with it, just go.
Yes. And I'm glad you brought that up, Jadene, because I was going to ask you about Mike. Obviously, I have an agenda being a sibling. And I do think a lot of times as siblings, our parents worry, am I giving all of my kids what they need. Are they getting what they need? I don't want them to feel responsible for their sibling. And we all have different stories and unique circumstances, but I can certainly relate to Mike. And, now I'm going to cry. There's nothing more beautiful than that sibling bond. Just to connect, no matter how far apart you are in age, no matter the developmental difference. That's your brother, that's your sister. And they're your friend for life. So the fact that Mike never saw Matt as anything but his brother, and similarly, if somebody didn't treat Matthew, my brother, the way that they should have, you're out. You're not my friend. And I just can relate so much to Mike as a sibling, and I hope I can meet him one day too. But I think Mike just shared his heart so recently on TikTok and how he felt about Matt. And even as a kid, though, I think it's always so beautiful how as young kids and teenagers, Mike basically told you what you needed to do. Matt's a part of our family and he belongs here. And I'm so in agreement with Mike. There's nothing like that sibling bond. And I'm glad you brought that up, because so many of our listeners are siblings and they are caring for their loved one. And it's the best gift I've ever been given in this lifetime.
And that just goes now full circle to why siblings are so important to me, because they're an important part of our loved ones' lives, and they're an important part of the parents' lives. And they may or may not be the ones responsible when the parents can no longer take over. And Mike even posted something again recently about, if he had his choice, he would have Matt living with him. But his services are down here. So where we are now, he's got his doctors and stuff. So I love the siblings.
And Jadene, I wish that I could, sorry, Kristin, did you want to finish?
No, because I'll start crying.
I wish I could give you a hug, because I also want to say I am sorry. I am sorry that it came at a price, because I can see it in your beautiful eyes. You had to struggle and suffer things that you should not have had to suffer through and struggle through.
Thank you. Well, I'm still fighting the fight. I mean, there are times, that's why, I know you guys pick up on that. I still have some anger issues, and sometimes it comes out in our conversations, and I hate that. That's the part I hate about myself the most. But I've had to fight for everything for Matt. Everything. When you get handed the role of parent or sibling of a kid with a disability, yeah, you better buckle in, because it's a marathon.
You're never going to stop fighting.
I think this from his TikTok, I got to make it stop. His TikTok, he told the world, he says, I don't get much time to spend with my brother these days. And while he has never really spoken, he has taught me a lot about compassion and a lot about patience. Not one of us are created the same, and that's okay. We each have a special part in this world.
Perfectly said. Perfectly said. Yeah. And I hope that makes you as a mom feel like
it was the biggest gift.
Like you did it, you won, you did it,
Yeah, and it was the biggest gift. Yeah. Well, as long as Matt believes that, that's what matters. Yeah. And Mike believes it. Yeah.
I believe they know how much they're loved. I really do. I just, knowing you and knowing your heart, they know how much they're loved. Well, this was such an inspiring and raw and real conversation. And I'm so glad that we took the time to do this. And it's only the beginning. I can't wait to keep going with these.
No, I love you guys.